Be going on all week. And tonight we're going to be talking about diabetes, something that is affecting a lot of people, amen. And if you don't mind, I would like to start with a word of prayer. Loving Father, we want to thank you for the opportunity to come tonight and learn some more about our health and specifically diabetes. And we just pray that you would give us wisdom, give us understanding, and Lord, impress upon our hearts that our choices affect our health every day. And so help us to be conscientious of that and make good choices. We want to pray for our speaker, ask you to put your words in his head and in his heart, and Lord, give him wisdom from heaven. And we pray that in the end that we will be able to make those better choices. And we pray for it in Jesus' name. Amen.
All right. Well, let me go ahead and say good evening to everyone. I'm so glad to see you all, and I'm glad that we have another opportunity to talk a little bit about disease and, more importantly, understanding the causes, ways to prevent it, and if we have it, even possibilities of how to overcome it. And tonight we're dealing with, of course, diabetes. Now, when we talk about diabetes, we're especially going to be focusing on type 2. I'll talk a little bit about type 1 as well. Type 1 diabetes affects about 5% of Americans, where type 2 diabetes affects the other 95. So you're going to notice that's why I'm going to talk a little bit about type 2 and give an emphasis to that. However, if there is somebody here who is either battling with type 1 diabetes or you know someone and care deeply about them and would like to know what are some ways you can get them some help to improve on their condition, see me after the meeting. I can go ahead and still get you connected with some individuals that are medical professionals, of course, that can also help in these areas. But again, tonight we're going to be dealing largely with type 2. When we deal with the question of diabetes, we're dealing with glucose, okay? Glucose, what's another word for glucose? Sugar, exactly. And, our subject tonight is diabetes. Is it really the sugar? I remember when my father had, diabetes and, I'd eat an apple or something, or I'd eat some fruit, and I'd say, Dad, why don't you try this? And then my father would say, oh, no, I can't. I'm diabetic. And then I would say, well, what does that have to do with anything? Because I didn't know anything at that time. And he was like, well, my doctor says I can't eat a lot of sugar. And I was like, really? And he said, yeah. And so anything sweet, he would stay away from it. And, and over the many, many years, a lot of people who are afflicted with diabetes look at it that way because it is glucose. It's a glucose issue or a sugar issue. And a lot of people believe that we need to stay away from sweet stuff. Now, to a degree that's true, but we're going to debunk some of these ideas as well. That's why we talked about diabetes. Is it really the sugar? So we're going to get into that. But let's just go ahead and take a look at it. Diabetes occurs when the body becomes unable to handle glucose or sugar, which builds up to dangerous levels in the blood. A diagnosis of diabetes is usually made when a blood sugar test is consistently above 125 milligrams, okay, after an 8-hour fast. So you would not test your sugar levels, you wouldn't test your glucose after a meal. That's where you're going to see you get spikes. Whenever you eat a meal, you're going to get big spikes in your glucose levels. So that's not where you'll necessarily get your most accurate reading. If you really want to know, am I battling with diabetes or not, you would typically let an 8-hour fast go by. That's why a lot of individuals test their blood sugar in the morning because it is assumed that they had at least 8 hours of sleep, okay? So if you have over 125 milligrams in your glucose levels, that would be indicative of diabetes. Now, it says fasting blood sugar levels of 100 to 125 are known as pre-diabetes. And then, of course, if you're under 100, that's no diabetes. So that's really where we want to be, is we want to be under that 100 number. And there are ways that you can check it nowadays. You can go to a CVS, a Rite Aid, and you can pick up a little unit and it pricks your finger and does a little measuring itself. It's very easy to know where you are. If you are getting your annual checkups, then some of us are familiar with the term A1C. Obviously, that is going to test over 3 months of the glucose levels in your bloodstream, and it gives you a very accurate reading of where you are as it pertains to diabetes or not. Now, the top 10 causes of death in America is right here, okay? And a lot of them have spiked up quite a bit. You know, this is why disease, unfortunately, is seriously on a rise. But what's amazing is that these are preventable. And that's something that we're really trying to encourage people is, you know, one of the most important subjects, let me give you a quick little review. Sunday night, we talked about God's great desire. And the reason we did that is we wanted people to know that God cares more about an individual than just their spirituality. We wanted people to know that God cares about your health. Then Monday night, last night, we talked about hypertension, the silent killer, and how to deal with that. Tonight, we're dealing with diabetes. Tomorrow, we're going to deal with cancer. On Thursday, we're going to talk about the army within, the immune system, okay? And then Friday, we're going to talk about diet and the mind. Saturday evening, we're going to talk about something called total temperance or total self-control. In my humble opinion, I believe Saturday night's message is the most important. Because what I'm realizing that really hurts my heart more than anything else when I think about how many times I've had to visit the hospital, how many times I've had to go to a lot of funerals, is I'm noticing that it seems as if society, we in society, we really lack control. We are just so, it's kind of like we know a lot of the rights, we know a lot of the wrongs, but we're just finding ourselves victim to our habits, and we don't really know how to overcome it. Because I'm looking at these numbers here, which is quite startling, right? Heart disease alone, 633,842 people die every year from heart disease, okay? And then you add on to that cancer at 595 and chronic lower respiratory diseases and so on. And of course, diabetes is number 7. The latest statistics show that there's about 80,000 people that die every year in America from diabetes and the complications that come with it. And yet, all of it's preventable. It's like it's right there in the world of choices. It's just about the choices that we make. And yet here it is that even some, again, the health thought leaders of today, like Dr. Dean Ornish, he said, think about it. He said heart disease and diabetes, which account for more deaths in the U.S. and worldwide than everything else combined, not exactly true, but I get his point. He says are completely preventable by making comprehensive lifestyle changes without drugs or surgery. You know, and it's like, it's just so amazing that, and I love it that physicians are saying this, you know, that they're saying, hey, folks, it's not always about surgery. It's not always about drugs. People like Dr. Ornish helps my confidence go up in our medical world today. It helps me know that there are physicians out there that are not looking at us as dollar figures. They actually care. They actually care, which I think is pretty awesome. Again, you know, not just Dr. Ornish, but Dr. Esselstyn as well. He said heart disease, cancer, diabetes, obesity, it's like a tsunami. The interesting thing is that all experts would agree that the cause of this tsunami really is our lifestyle. So it's amazing, once again, getting back to that lifestyle. It's about this wonderful gift that makes us different from the animal world, you know? It's this wonderful ability to make choices. We can make choices that go in harmony with nature. We can make choices that are out of harmony with nature. But the bottom line is in our choices, we can really see these things change. And here's the deal. If lifestyle is what brought on our diabetes, then maybe by some changes in the lifestyle, it'll help get rid of our diabetes. And yeah, it's so true, and it's a great thing. So when we talk about the statistics, right, we look at our wonderful, beloved country of the United States of America, and we ask ourselves, who has this disease? How many people have it? Well, 282,801 Americans die each year from diabetes and its complications. That is a very, very big number. 282,801 Americans die each year from diabetes. Now, if you remember the previous slide, we were only looking at about 80. But now the numbers are climbing through the roof. That's why I know that we are familiar with the term pandemic, Because if you were around during COVID, obviously we all heard that word just about every single time on the news, the media, and everywhere else you can possibly listen to something. It talked about the pandemic. But what a lot of people don't know is diabetes is a pandemic. Diabetes is a pandemic. It's been around for a long time, and it's not going anywhere. It is going up. It is not going down. It is progressing. That's the reason why tonight I almost would have felt like we would have done a disservice to the community of Folsom if all we did was talk about diabetes just tonight. But we are actually in the planning phase of doing a program that has swept across America in great success, and it's called Diabetes Undone. And the Diabetes Undone program is potent. It was put together by Dr. Wes Youngberg, an individual that I had the privilege of talking and consulting with myself personally, a very good man, brilliant man, who put together this whole series called Diabetes Undone. So this is something that you look forward to hearing more about in the very near future, is that, this Folsom Granite Bay group is going to be putting on a series called Diabetes Undone, where we're just going to focus in on diabetes. The statistics of those who have gone through a Diabetes Undone program, they are seeing anywhere from a 60 to 70 or 80% reversal of their type 2 diabetes. So it's something that really, 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 really works. And so I'm looking forward to that. But yes, 282,801 Americans die each year from diabetes and its complications. Now, African, Hispanic, and Native Americans have the highest rate of diabetes. African, Hispanic, and Native Americans have the highest rate of diabetes. So when you think about our neighbors, our friends, our coworkers, family, ourselves, it's like this is something to remember. Where's the disease having some of its greatest and strongest impact? We're going to save a portion for the questions. Write down your question, okay? I don't want you to forget. Good. Now, here's the part that was really alarming to me. Nearly 7 million adult Americans are undiagnosed diabetics. 7 million adult Americans are undiagnosed diabetics. So there are a lot of people walking around because, sadly, a lot of us have not, remember this whole week is, what is the title for this week's health emphasis? What do we call this? Take charge of your health. A lot of people have not gotten on this page yet. Now, I have no condemnation for anybody. I don't judge an individual for not thinking this way. But we live in a society where immediate gratification is the name of the game. I just want what I want. I do what I do. I don't want what I don't want. And I don't want to do what I don't want to do. And people live a very, very self-focused life. And what ends up happening is we are not necessarily thinking cause to effect, consequences for our decisions, things of that nature. We just kind of, I heard my son one time. I said, "Hey, son, how you doing?" He said, "Hey, Dad, I'm just living in the moment." And I was like, that could be a little concerning. And we had our little father-son talk on that. But, it's like that's what a lot of people are doing. They're living in the moment. Just, hey, this is how I feel. This is what I'm going to do. And what ends up happening is we don't necessarily think with forethought like, hey, what I do right now can have an impact on me at a later time. So therefore, I need to think a little bit about what I'm going to do right now. So unfortunately, a lot of people don't really check themselves. They don't, you ask the average person, how many of you do an annual checkup with your doctor? Like a lot of people don't even do that anymore. It's like, seriously, that's almost unheard of. People say, I feel great, therefore I am great. And the problem is, for a period of time, with diabetes and with hypertension, you can feel great but not be great. Right. And that's the reality. And so this is why it's important for us to get checked out. I really encourage you, if you, at the very least, once a year, see your physician and go ahead and get that annual checkup. And make sure that part of your annual checkup is a A1C. Let them go ahead and take a look at that history to see where your glucose numbers are looking, because they might make you aware of something that you might be able to say, that's why I'm so tired. It's like sometimes we kind of go through stuff, but we don't know why. But this helps us understand why, okay? That's a very alarming number. 7 million adult Americans are undiagnosed diabetics. Well, of that number, 750,000 to 800,000 are African Americans. And that's why, like I told you last night, there are diseases in our world, there are diseases in our country that affect a lot of people, but then they especially affect a lot of communities. And then if we are adjacent to, have connections with these various communities, you can kind of become a messenger of light, if you will. You can become somebody who can help others, that even if you are not afflicted with it, if you know that there are communities next to you, you can say, hey, maybe there's some things we can do to help those communities out so they can have the abundant life like maybe some of us are living. When we think about the complications, they are abundant. Remember, people not only die merely from quote-unquote diabetes, but it's the complications that comes with it. What are these complications? The number one cause of amputation in America is diabetes. I literally watched my father just get chopped up. I mean, from just toes to foot to legs. And that was a rough thing to watch because, I love my dad. And it was just really hard to watch that. But the number one cause of amputations in America today is diabetes. It's the number one cause of blindness. Number one cause of blindness, people losing their sight. It's one thing to be born blind, but it's another thing when you had it and then you lose it. That can be pretty punishing to the individual. It shortens your life by 5 to 10 years. It can shorten your lifespan by 5 to 10 years because your life is in your blood. And if your blood is loaded with that glucose, it becomes more sludge-like. It's not going to flow as freely throughout the vessels like it's supposed to. That's why diabetes and hypertension are like first cousins. Because if the glucose is building up in the blood, then the blood is not flowing as it should, and now the heart has to pump harder to get that blood to go through. And that's why typically you find diabetics are also hypertensive. They kind of almost go hand in hand, okay? Not only that, it's an increased risk of stroke, again, the thickening of the blood and things of that nature. It causes tremendous kidney problems. And that's why you should always get, again, that once a year, get a metabolic panel. Okay, you get that metabolic panel, they look at your kidneys, they look at your liver enzymes, they take a look at all of that, okay? You want to make sure you're doing good. Then, heart disease is right there in there. Delayed healing, it affects your platelets and things of that nature. So sometimes you get a wound, and it doesn't, heal very quickly, okay? And lastly, it increases susceptibility to infections because if your wound is, when you get cut, I had this little video, I used to teach it to my children when they were homeschooling, and we had an anatomy physiology class. We taught our children anatomy and physiology. And in the anatomy physiology class, I would show my children this little video of how a knife, when it cuts the hand, it wasn't a real video, it was an animation, but it showed how when the knife cuts the hand, immediately red blood cells, white blood cells, blood platelets, fibrins, it's like your body is like the story of redemption. When you think about it, it's just amazing when you study the human body. The Bible teaches that there was a plan of redemption in existence before the wound of sin ever came into the world, right? And then when the wound of sin came into the world, the plan of redemption went live. It went active, but it was already in existence. It's the same thing in our bodies. In our bodies, we have a little plan of redemption. And once a wound comes in our body, the plan of redemption goes live and it goes into action to begin its healing work. And it's amazing because when we have delayed healing, that plan of redemption, that healing of the wound, moves really slow. And as a result of that, we become way more susceptible to infection. So these are all of the challenges that we face sometimes when we're dealing with diabetes and its complications. Now, like I told you earlier, there are types of diabetes. You have type 1, and there's a reason why you're seeing a child's face there, okay? Type 1, and then you have type 2. There's a reason that you're seeing that picture there as well. When we're dealing with type 1 diabetes, we call it insulin dependent. Notice, it affects about 5% of the diabetics. This type of diabetes usually begins in childhood and is commonly known as juvenile diabetes. So anytime you see type 1 diabetes, it's not that an adult can't have it, but it's typically starting in childhood, and as a result of that, they call it juvenile diabetes. These type of diabetics cannot survive without insulin, therefore they are called insulin-dependent diabetes mellitus. All right? That's type 1. When we get to type 2, however, this is pretty interesting. So let me see if I can use my little magnifier here, because I want to walk us through these steps, because we have a few things. So when you eat food, goes into the stomach, right? When that food goes into the stomach, eventually it's going to trigger your pancreas. And your pancreas is going to release some insulin, okay? That insulin is like a riding partner. You know, like if you ever do riding partners when you travel and things of that nature, when people used to go to work and they kind of park their car and another person jumps in, you ride together. Insulin and glucose ride together in the bloodstream. So when you eat food and that food gets broken down into glucose, the pancreas releases insulin. So the glucose is flowing through your bloodstream and the insulin kind of rides along with it, right? And when the insulin rides along with it, they eventually get to the cell. The insulin works like a key. And what the insulin's job is to ride with the glucose, get to the cell and say, hey cell, open up to receive the glucose. In a healthy body, non-diabetic body, the cell says, insulin, how you doing? Come on in. And the insulin goes ahead and opens up the cell takes in the glucose, and we get something called energy, right? But here's the problem. When we are dealing with the issue of diabetes, we're dealing with glucose, insulin, riding together. Insulin gets to the cell and says, cell, open up. Take in this glucose. And the cell is just kind of, the cell is just not responding to the insulin. And as a result of that, the glucose says, look, I can't wait here forever. I got to go somewhere. So the cell, the glucose says, then I'm just going to ride free through the bloodstream. And then glucose just starts building up and building up and building up in our bloodstream rather than being absorbed in the cell like it's supposed to. This is the issue with type 2 diabetes. So notice, when we look at this, a little closer, you notice you got 1, 2, 3, 4. So 1, stomach converts food to glucose. 2, glucose enters the bloodstream. 3, pancreas produces sufficient insulin, but it is resistant to effective use. 4, glucose is unable to enter body effectively. 5, glucose levels increase. It just starts flowing through the bloodstream, and this is the issue with type 2 diabetes. So it's called adult onset diabetes or non-insulin dependent diabetes mellitus. This type affects over 90% of diabetics. Now here's the deal. Most type 2 diabetics have plenty of insulin in their bodies when diagnosed, but we need to talk about that something. Something blocks the insulin so it cannot do its job properly. Now, this is where we're going to put on our investigation hats, and we're going to find out a little bit about that something that's causing the insulin to not do its job properly. When we talk about signs, there are some warning signs. So diabetes is not exactly like the silent killer. The silent killer has no symptoms. Typically, the first symptom is the heart attack or the stroke. But with diabetes, you are privileged to get a few symptoms. Now, please remember this. What I'm about to put on the screen, I don't know if there's any hypochondriacs in here. Okay? I used to be a hypochondriac, so I know all about it. You have one symptom and you're like, I'm dying. And, we go into this terrible anxiety. So there's something I learned it's actually in the Bible, which is really amazing. It's in the Bible, but it's actually true in medicine. In the Bible, it often says, out of the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, so let it be established. In medicine, it's very similar. You don't say you have something if there's just one witness. You usually want 2 or 3 or more witnesses. If you have 2, 3 or more witnesses of symptoms, then you might want to go get checked. But if you just have one, please do not conclude that you're in trouble. All right? Here we go. Sign number 1, frequent urination. Okay? Frequent urination. Some people frequently urinate because they drink a lot of water. Okay? So don't think that because you frequently urinate, you have diabetes. Maybe you just drink a lot of water, and that's the reason you're going to the bathroom often. But that is a sign. Because with diabetes, even if you didn't drink a lot of water, you would still frequently urinate, okay? How about this one? Weight loss. Sometimes weight just starts dropping off, but you're not exercising. You're not doing anything to lose weight, but you're finding some of your weight is falling off. That could also be indicative of diabetes. Then you have excessive thirst. I mean, it's winter, it's not like the summer, it's not like it's hot outside, but for some reason, there's this excessive amount of thirst that we constantly have where we feel the need to drink and to drink and to drink and to drink. That can be a sign. Lastly, fatigue and irritability. Just always tired and easily irritated to the point where people sometimes look at you like, what's wrong? I mean, what's the big deal? I understand there's traffic, but why do you have to get this irritable? You know, it's just kind of like whatever's going on. Now, again, if you had just one of those, don't even sweat it. But if you have 2, 3, or all 4, you might want to say, let me think about this. And if it's 2, 3, or 4, over at least 2 weeks. If you're finding over 2 weeks you're still showing 2, 3, or 4 of those symptoms, then you might want to say, hey, mom, hey, dad, or hey, dear, honey, or whoever it is you talk to and say, you know what, I think I need to go get checked out. And then it might be important to go ahead and see your physician. But pay attention to your symptoms, people, because sometimes you may be shown. Remember, millions of people are undiagnosed diabetics. Make sure you're not one of them, okay? Pay attention to the signs. Now, blurred vision is also a big one, okay? Blurred vision. Blurred vision can come because you just need some glasses. But blurred vision can also come because of the complications that are associated with diabetes. Now, we learned something last night. Let's assume, I'm going to give you a little pop quiz. Let's assume that you had 2, 3, or 4 of the symptoms. It was lasting over 2 to 3 to 4 weeks. You went to see your doctor, and your doctor said, okay, well, we just did a test on you, and it turns out that your glucose levels are 135. Which one is that? No diabetes, pre-diabetes, full-blown diabetes. Which one is it? That's full-blown. That's diabetic, okay? Because remember, if you're above what number? 125. If you're above 125, that's diabetes. Now, let's say your doctor said you were 135. You have diabetes. Question, what's our first step? Say it again. What's the cause? Remember that? We learned that beautiful new dynamic last night. We learned whenever we're dealing with a problem, always ascertain the cause. Look for the cause. And even though we know, unfortunately, in our medical world today, a lot of times, that's not necessarily the mode. The mode in a lot of our traditional medical practices is to address the symptoms. Symptomatic treatment is not a waste of time, but symptomatic treatment is not the solution. You understand that difference? Symptomatic treatment is not a waste of time. You got to deal with it. If your glucose levels are really high and you're going through some bodily reactions, headaches or whatever, you need to deal with that symptom. You're suffering. But you don't want to stop there. You want to get to that cause. Now, we learned that lesson from a place we didn't expect to learn it from, right? We learned when it comes to ascertaining the cause, we learned the curse causeless shall not come, and the cause which I don't know, what am I to do? Search it out. Remember that? So remember, that's the principle. If you have a problem, ascertain the cause. Find it out. If you don't know what it is, find it out. And in your search, if you seek, more than likely you will find. Now, when it comes to the reality of this, then let's go ahead and let's go on this journey. Let's go on this journey a little bit. There was an article put out that was pretty good, talking about the causes of type 2 diabetes. And here's what it said. Diabetes is a number of diseases that involves problems with the hormone insulin. While not everyone with type 2 diabetes is overweight, obesity and lack of physical activity are 2 of the most common what? Causes of this form of diabetes. It is also responsible for nearly 95% of diabetes cases in the United States. So notice, obesity, and lack of physical activity. Family, I'm telling you the truth. We were created to move. We were really created to move. One of the worst things one of the worst health choices we could make is sitting too long, just lying down too long, and just not moving enough. One of the things I'm very grateful for, a lot of people have smartphones or smart watches, and I remember when I first bought a smartwatch, and I was sitting down doing some work on my computer, because I'm a brain guy. You shake my hand, you'll notice it's kind of soft, but don't worry about that. The calluses are on my brain. If you could touch my brain, you strike a match on my brain. But, it's like, I think a lot. I'm a massive thinker. I brain work very hard. And for all the brain workers in the room, you really need to exercise. Okay, I'm just letting you know that. If you're a hardcore brain worker, you really got to pause sometimes, drop on the ground, do some push-ups, go take a 5-minute walk or jog. You got to move around a little bit. But the reality is that we were made to move. Okay, it is almost a curse to society that we sit so much and we just don't move around enough. So now, when I first bought my first smartwatch, I was working at my computer doing my little brain work, and next thing you know, it went boop, boop. And I was like, what's that? And it says, time to stand up. And I was like, get out of town. I said, the watch actually tells you it's time to stand up? And so you know what I did? I said, okay. And so I stood up for a little while, and after I stood up and just moved around for about 60 seconds, my watch goes boop, boop, and it says, you did it. And I was just like, okay. And so I went and sat back down again. But hey, if you got a smartwatch, great, let it help you out with that. But you want to do something, if you know that you're the kind of person that zones in on your work and you're just sitting there, what have you, you want to go ahead and do some things that helps remind you, don't sit too long. It's time to start moving around. I bought a desk at my house, and I have a little very, very small office area in my home, but I have a desk. Time to stand up. I stand up, but I still got to work. So you know what I do? I press a button. The thing only costs like $149. I press the button, and the desk just goes zzz, and my desk goes up to where I'm standing, and now I can do this. Now I can do, and now I'm working while I'm standing. And I'm realizing that they got a lot of these things. They have these desks now that can stand up. I have a friend of mine, he works over at a clinic called Stellant, and he's one of the doctors there, and I came to his office one time, and he actually has a desk that not only can stand, but he has a little treadmill. And he actually is walking on the treadmill while he's doing it. And I'm like, this is crazy. I mean, there's just a lot of ways to keep moving around. But look at this. Obesity and lack of physical activity are two of the most common causes of this form of diabetes type 2. So we're already getting to the cause. And remember what we learned. When you find out the cause, what did you really find out? Who remembers that? Well, we called it another word. When you find out your cause, you found your cure. Your cure is in your cause. Remember that? Your cure is in your cause. So let's go ahead and let's talk about it. Now, again, a lot of times people say, what about disease? Heredity. Heredity is real. What did we learn about heredity? It's not an excuse. Why? Because we learned heredity loads the gun. Heredity loads the gun. But what did we learn pulls the trigger? Remember, we learned lifestyle pulls the trigger. So heredity loads the gun, but it's our lifestyle that pulls the trigger. So we can have genetic disposition to get certain diseases because our moms, our dads, and whatnot had it. But it's the lifestyle choice. And that lifestyle choice that you and I make, that's what's going to pull that trigger, and then we end up getting that disease or not. Now, when we talk about the cause of type 2 diabetes, like I said, it can occur if any process results in the destruction or malfunction of insulin in the cells and in the rest of the body. And yes, inherited mutations can play a part, right? That's what we talked about, genetic disposition. But here's the thing that they found. There are two key causes to type 2 diabetes. So now I'm going to go to my book here. So you remember I told you we got these little health books here. This one is called Health Power. And this was put together by Dr. Hans Diehl and Aline Luddington. And they have a little story in here in the diabetes section that I just wanted to read to you. I thought that this was amazing. Here's what it says. James Anderson, MD, professor of medicine and clinical nutrition at the College of Medicine at the University of Kentucky and a widely respected authority on diabetes, evaluated the effect of diet on blood sugar levels. Now watch what Dr. Anderson did. This was amazing. And we're about to answer this question, is it really the sugar? It says, Dr. Anderson was able, it says, just as others had done before him, Dr. Anderson was able to turn lean, healthy young men into mild diabetics in less than 2 weeks. You want to know how he did it? This is how he did it. It says, turned them all into mild diabetics in less than 2 weeks by feeding them a rich 65% fat diet. Now, watch this. It says a similar group fed a lean 10% fat diet plus, here we go, 1 pound of sugar a day. Think about that. In less than 2 weeks, in about 2 weeks, he fed them a 65% fat diet, and they all became mild diabetics. He took another group, and he fed them a 10% fat diet, but 1 pound of sugar per day for the same time period. Guess how many diabetics it produced? Not one diabetic was produced. Not one diabetic was produced. In other words, the issue with diabetes, way more than the sugar, is the fat. And the reason why this is so important is because when my father was in the hospital for diabetes and all of his complications, I remember my dad said, Dwayne, I'm thirsty. I want to get a lemonade. He loved lemonade. And so I said, sure, Dad. And so he said, can you get me a diet lemonade? Absolutely. So I get my father a diet lemonade. So I gave him a diet lemonade, and Dad's sipping at it, right? He's just laying in his bed and he's, sipping on it. And the nurse came in. And the nurse came in and she said, Mr. Lemon. She was like, you should not be drinking that lemonade. It has all that sugar in it. And she just starts getting on my dad. So she takes his lemonade away. Then she comes back later on and says, all right, Mr. Lemon, it's time to eat. And she gave him a plate and took the plate off, and it was this big piece of pork, just fat-laden pork. And he said, here's your meal. Now, I'm actually a very nice guy. I really am. I know the eyebrows can be deceiving. Sometimes my eyebrows make me look more mean than I really am. But I can't help this. But I'm actually a very nice guy. But I remember I said, nurse, can I talk to you? And I just took her out the room. And I gave her a little education on what really is the contributor to diabetes. And I said, that diet lemonade would have done my father no harm. But I said, but that nasty piece of slab of pork that you just gave my father, I said, that is going to hurt him in worse ways than what you think that lemonade would have done to him. Please change his food. She said, well, we need to get the dietitian involved. I said, all right, we'll get the dietitian. And then the dietitian comes down, and I'm going to tell you what happened next in just a little bit. Now, I want you to watch this. You see, one of the big culprits in diabetes, which we really need to talk to the whole world about, is animal fat. Animal fat is way more threatening to a diabetic than sugar. It's not that we're going to the world of diabetics and saying, eat all the sugar you want. Because what does sugar ultimately turn into? Fat. It's going to store in that liver, and it's going to help that abdomen start spreading out, okay? So we're not saying sugar's a great thing to eat, go eat it. But this overemphasis of the sugar versus hardly any talk of animal fat is a problem in the world of diabetes. It's a very serious problem. That's why we titled our message tonight, Diabetes, Is It Really the Sugar? The sugar is way lower on the totem pole. It's the animal fat that we really need to warn people about. Did you know that we're still struggling with this because the food industry influences a lot of scientific research, So, that's a problem in and of itself. But did you know, and I always tell people this, I said, see, people don't know the Bible is a health book. Do you know if a lot of people followed more of what the Bible said and what the Bible taught a long time ago, we'd have way less cases of diabetes? Because one of the key contributors to diabetes is animal fat. What did God say about it? God said, it shall be a perpetual statute for your generations throughout all your dwellings that you eat neither fat nor blood. It was always a principle consistent. That didn't change with Jesus. When he came and died on the cross, he didn't save fat. He saved people. So in other words, if it was bad to eat animal fat in the Old Testament, it's bad to eat animal fat in the New Testament, and it's bad to eat animal fat today. I have never seen a video or anything where they try to provide scientific data. Go eat as much animal fat as you can and become healthy. I mean, that's a strange teaching. But that's exactly what's contributing to diabetes, is too much animal fat. Not only that, but also too much animal fat in the body is going to produce too much fat on the body. And so the reality is when you really think about what's the big issue with diabetes, it's really fat and fat. Fat in the diet, fat in the body. And if we were to educate individuals to say we must do all that we can to eliminate as much as possible fat in the diet and fat on the body, this is one of the best ways you can fight diabetes. To eliminate fat in the diet, fat in the body. Now, I don't know if you ever heard of something called TOFI. TOFI, T-O-F-I. TOFI, you can look it up when you get some time. TOFI stands for thin on outside, fat on inside. In other words, this is one of the reasons why you have a lot of slim people that are diabetics as well, because they're thin on outside, but they have a lot of fat on the inside. They're eating a lot of, fatty foods and things of that nature, but they probably have like this amazingly fast metabolism that they still burn off a lot of things. But TOFI also is a lot of reasons why we have a lot of slim diabetics. They're thin on the outside, but they're fat on the inside. And that's called TOFI, okay? You can look it up, like I said, you'll see it there. But the reality is that fat in the diet, fat on the body, if we eliminate these two, boy, we are really getting ahead of the game, okay? When we talk about fat on the body, I do encourage individuals. You can either do waist to hip ratio, which is actually more accurate, or you can do the typical BMI. If you do the BMI, being overweight, BMI of 25 to 29.9, or affected by obesity, which is 30 to 39.9, or morbid obesity, which is over 40, greatly increases your risk of developing type 2 diabetes. The more excess weight you have, the more resistant your muscle and tissue cells become to your own insulin hormone, okay? So you want to really do something about that. Don't, there's a guy one time, he said his wife started gaining weight, and I appreciate this. I think this is good, okay? Because we all been there, done that. We gain weight, we have weight that we don't want, and I like this attitude. One time there was a lady who gained some more weight, and she got all conscious about it. And she told her husband, honey, I feel so bad, I'm gaining all this weight, I don't have the original body when you married me. And her husband responded and said, honey, it's all right, it's just more of you to love. And I thought to myself, I was like, hey, that's a pretty good response, right? But while I affirm any man or any woman that if their husband or wives have gained unwanted or unhealthy weight, I affirm we should still love and accept each other even in those changes. But what I've learned is if we do love and accept each other, we should encourage each other to start losing it. You understand that difference? It's like you want to love your spouse and love your friends to say, hey, I accept you even with your body changes. That's a good thing. I love that part, okay? But at the same time, because I want you to be around a lot longer, I'm gonna gently do some motivation to say, hey, let's start losing some of that body fat that we've built up over time, because family, I'm letting you know right now, too much or excess body fat works against us. It's not neutral. it's working against us, okay? It makes life more challenging and harder in different ways. So you want to work on it, okay? Now, a lot of people who go through this, now, I'm not trying to gross you out here, okay? I hope you can handle this. I just like having real talk with people. A lot of people who are battling with obesity, there's a reason for that. Maybe we're eating too many meals or eating the wrong foods and things of that nature. It's a battle, okay? Some of us love food and everything else. I'm the biggest I've ever been. I'm not normally 190 pounds. I'm usually about 180, 175. And I got some muscle mixed with it, but I got some fat that I do not want, and I'm making sure that I'm about to absolutely get rid of it. Now watch this. Here's a reality of what happens when we begin gaining a lot of weight that is unwanted. Our bowels start to get a little off. And there's a good old saying that death begins in the colon. I don't know if you ever heard that before, Jethro Kloss and others. Death begins in the colon. It's important that you eliminate properly. So I'm going to actually put this up for you. This is not for you to tell me your story, but this is something that I want to encourage you to aim for if you know you're not there. When you have a bowel movement, it should be almost like a baby. When a baby has a bowel movement according to their meals. If a baby eats 3 times a day, it has 3 bowel movements. If it eats 2 times a day, it has 2 bowel movements. Some of us are eating 3, 4, 5 meals a day, but we're having 1 bowel movement, or 2, or we're having interesting bowel movements. And sometimes that's indicative of compaction. We're not getting good elimination. And if you and I want some problems, do not eliminate properly. That's inviting problems in our system. So I put this chart on the screen because I want to give you your goal. Here's your goal, okay? Your goal is if you're having bowel movements, you should be between 3 and 4. If you are not between 3 and 4, you got some work to do, okay? And, when you go to the restroom, number 4 is optimum. I mean, the bowel movement comes out almost like the shape of your colon, okay? If you're going to the bathroom and you're able to eliminate and it's coming out there just almost like the shape of your colon, you're doing really good, okay? That is indicative of good elimination. If you're finding that you're here, these little sausage shapes or little lumps or what have you, there's some constipation going on, which means you might need to drink more water, you need to probably get more fiber in your diet, or things of that nature. You can solve this problem very easily. If you're down here, you're probably lacking electrolytes and things of that nature, and you just need to build up on some things that'll make it more solid. But the bottom line is that I encourage people, pay attention to your stool. It lets you know if you're having some pretty decent gut health or not. But this is typically associated with obesity. The more obese we are, usually the more constipated we are and irregular bowel movements, and we want to make sure we watch out for that. Now, when it talks about things that can also contribute to diabetes, here's a big one, okay? We talked about it. White rice. Very bad, especially if you're diabetic. If you're diabetic, if I was doing a health consultation with you, my goal is to get you off of white rice as quickly as possible. I'll work with you. Like if you say, I eat white rice 3 times a day, I'll say, okay, can we do 2 times a day? We'll work with you. But white rice, if you remember last night, when I showed you a whole grain, you have endosperm, you have bran, and then you have the germ. White rice is the endosperm, but you're missing that bran, which means you're missing that fiber, which is contributive to constipation because you're not getting the fiber. So that's the reason why you want to definitely watch out for that. What else is in the same category? White pasta. Same thing. It's all enriched. Okay? Don't be deceived by that word enriched. There's about 24 minerals and vitamins in every grain. The enrichment process is to take out all 24 and to put back 4. And they have the nerve to call it enriched. It's one of the greatest deceptions in the food world. Do not buy enriched wheat and these type of things. It's deception. You want whole wheat. But watch out for the enriched foods. You're going to see this a lot in the world of pasta. Also, fried foods. These are all food groups that can really complicate diabetes. And then white bread. These type of things. Watch out for all of these enriched ingredients. These are the things that contributes because what they do is they break down very fast into glucose. and that shoots your sugar up. So when an individual is diabetic, we especially, now if you're not diabetic, ever so often enjoy your white rice or whatever, because I know a lot of people like it. But if you are diabetic, you need to be guarded because it's going to spike up. It's going to turn, it's called a simple sugar. Brown rice is called a complex carbohydrate. So you want to get more brown rice and quinoa and whole grains and watch out for a lot of the strip grains. This stuff is really hurting us, unfortunately. And lastly, of course, is smoking. Smoking does a whole cellular damage that's just a very serious issue. Now, for those of us who smoke or who know people who smoke, get your cameras out. This is a recipe that I have given to thousands. This recipe is called the Stop Smoking Urge recipe. It's actually when a person battles with smoking, this is something that we have them do, and it cancels out the urge immediately. It cancels out the urge immediately. Meat Ministry put this together, and it's done wonders for people. Like while they're going on a detox program, they'll go ahead and take this Stop Smoking Urge recipe, and it has done wonders for them. Okay? So again, I'll go ahead and let you take your pictures, no problem. But yeah, so these are the things you want to watch out for. So when we're dealing with diabetes, you're watching out for all the foods that work against us rather than for us. You got to watch out for the refined grains. You got to pull back from that. That's going to help you a lot. And like I said, you may not pull back from it altogether in one shot. If you eat a lot of refined grains, at least try to begin the process of scaling back and eventually changing it up. All right? Now, I think we're good. Wonderful. In our little book, Health Power, it talks about the foods to be avoided. So yes, should we still be guarded with sugar? Of course we should, because again, sugar in and of itself has many problems, but it also can contribute to some of our challenges of producing body fat. So therefore, sugar alternatives like stevia and agave are okay. But, you want to watch out for your corn syrups, your high fructose corn syrups, your regular white sugar. Watch out for those things. Overly ripe fruits and what have you, take them at a minimum. Meat and dairy products are contributors to diabetes. The excessive protein found in these foods actually does kidney damage. Okay? Animal protein is not friendly to the kidneys. And then refined foods, white flour, white pasta, and processed foods. All of these. These are the food groups that we would pull back from, all right? Now, what is it that we can do? There's a lot we can do. So let's talk about it. The first thing to remember is that in the world of medicine, always remember, the reason why there are so many health coaches, lifestyle practitioners in medicine is because the average physician, the average nurse is not taught a lot when it comes to nutrition in the regular schooling process. Take a look. It says, Dr. Strand says, in medical school, I had not received any significant instruction on the subject, talking about nutrition. He says, I was not alone. He says, only approximately 6% of the graduating physicians in the U.S. have any training in nutrition. Medical students may take elective courses on the topic, but few actually do. The education of most physicians is disease-oriented with a heavy emphasis on pharmaceuticals. We learn about drugs and why and when to use them. So that's typically what's going on in the world. That's why, you go to your physician and say, what should I eat? And they say, go to the dietitian. Now, here's the problem. If any of you are interested, I would encourage you to look up a gentleman by the name of Dr. Greger, Greger. He runs an organization called nutritionfacts.org. nutritionfacts.org. I just love the work that this man does. He challenges the modern day pyramids. You know how you have the health pyramids that we have and dairy and fish and poultry and da-da-da-da-da? He challenges all of this. And he's done some wonderful work on a very high level. And when the nurse told me that she had to change my father's food, she said she's going to call the dietitian. I said, call him. The dietitian came down. I said to the dietitian, I said, okay, you're the trained one in food, right? She said, yes. I said, okay, so you see the rice that you gave my father. I said, you gave him white rice. And she immediately looked at me and she says, I know where you're going. And I said, tell me where I'm going. She says, you're going to tell me that I should not give your father white rice because white rice is a simple sugar and we should have given him brown rice because it's a complex carbohydrate and it works better for diabetics. I said, that's exactly right. If you understand that, why didn't you give it to him? She said, he didn't ask. What's the name of our series this week? I'm telling you, it's like you got to take charge of your health. I'm thinking, how would you have expected him to ask? How do you expect the average person, especially in the South, to ask? That's one of the least healthiest states, South Carolina and all these. I'm like, how do you expect them to ask? So it's almost like they know, but they're not applying. It's a very sad situation. So again, this is the truth. A lot of medical practitioners, they don't really know much about nutrition, and that's why you're seeing a rise in health coaches and these type of things. Well, once again, our dear friend Hippocrates stated, let food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food. He said if we could give every individual the right amount of nourishment and exercise, not too little and not too much, we would have found the safest way to health. Hippocrates. Okay, so I put a lovely little picture that lets us know where our minds should be when it comes to the consumption of food, and that's right here. The more that we're eating that wonderful rainbow of food, it does wonders for us, okay? Especially, again, battling with diabetes. What should diabetics eat? A diet rich in fiber, okay? You want to be intentional. That's why we look for that word whole grain. Rich in fiber, since fiber helps to sustain the glucose levels and helps to avoid the highs and lows. So that's why we encourage those who are diabetic to please eat more whole foods. Whole grains, again, fresh fruits, fresh vegetables, raw foods when appropriate, and good fats like avocados and olives, which is not going to add to the gut like the bad fats, okay? But these are things that diabetics should eat, and a lot of it. If we can get this more into the diet, it's going to do wonders for us. In addition to that, what else can we do? Boy, we need to exercise. Now, I'm going to let you in on something. If there's anybody here who's battling with diabetes, I am going to implore you, please put this into practice, what I'm about to show you. Watch this. You're going to see drastic improvement very quickly, okay? Strong scientific base. If we are not exercising, we're not producing enough oxygen. Muscles in motion push glucose into the cells. Exercise improves circulation, which in diabetics are very poor. It helps normalize weight, and it helps lower blood sugar levels and helps eliminate waste. The more you move around is the more you start feeling the need to go to the bathroom and do things and eliminate. But I want you to look at this. I can't stress this enough. Everybody should be doing this, diabetic or not, but especially if you're diabetic. Over the years, researchers have found that a post-meal walk as short as 15 minutes can in fact help with digestion and improve blood sugar levels. Walking, they found, sped the rate at which food moved through the stomach. Every time I have a meal, even if I'm in my house, I walk right after the meal. And you walk for about 15 minutes, 7.5 minutes one way, 7.5 minutes back. Don't kick back on the recliner and lay back. That is a way that you invite GERD, gastroesophageal reflux disorder. That's how you get that acid reflux. You lie down too quick and all this stuff. After a meal, walk. And you will find you feel less sleepy, and it does wonders for glucose management, because after you eat, there's a spike. But if you eat and then walk, you literally mitigate that spike in a very beautiful way, okay? So it's called a digestion walk. A digestion walk. I want to encourage all of you, if you don't do that already, I would encourage you begin to adopt it. It does wonders for your digestion, and it does wonders for glucose management. In a study published in 2009, researchers found that a 20-minute walk about 15 minutes after dinner led to lower post-meal blood sugar levels in people with type 2 diabetes than either a walk before dinner or no walking at all. Another study published recently in Diabetes Cares found that in older adults who were overweight and sedentary, walking for 15 minutes shortly after each meal improved daily blood sugar levels to a great extent than a single 45-minute walk in the morning. So even though we say, oh, I walked in the morning, I did exercise, that's good. But after a meal, 15 minutes to 20 minutes, take a walk. It will do wonders for glucose management, wonders. okay? When it comes to getting good sleep, it's imperative. I know a lot of us battle with this, okay? If you're not getting good rest, just remember this. Those who sleep for less than 6 hours per night for at least a 2-week period have the same cognitive function of a person who is legally drunk. It's called sleep debt, okay? Sleep debt. Here's what Dr. Eve Van Couten found out in relation to lack of sleep. She found out that the way that lack of sleep affects the body was astonishing. Here's what she found. After 4 hours of sleep for 6 consecutive nights, healthy young men had blood test results that nearly matched those of diabetics. Their ability to process blood sugar was reduced by 30%. They had a huge drop in their insulin response, and they had elevated levels of a stress hormone called cortisol, which can lead to hypertension and memory impairment. So please do your best to get good sleep. And I know that that's a tough one for some of us. Some of us got a lot of things that are on our minds. We typically go to bed ruminating about our day and everything we heard and thought of and tried. But we want to, that's why it's for the Christian community, we try to read the Bible. We try to read promises from God or something that allows the mind to relax. But when you find yourself, if you're not Christian or what have you, okay. But you want to be able to do something that allows your mind to find a place of calm. So that way, you don't go to bed ruminating and go to bed at 9 but fall asleep at 12. You understand that? So you want to do your best to try to get good sleep, because if you're not getting good enough sleep, it can reduce your body's insulin response by up to 30%. So that's one of the reasons why when we do a health program, we put all diabetics on a program where they can try to get better sleep. Increase your fiber intake. These are just, some additional counsels here. But this is the last point I want to get to for us. Yes, here it is. In Diabetes UK, here's what they found. If stress doesn't go away, it can keep your blood sugar levels high and put you at higher risk of diabetes complications. It can also affect your mood and how you look at yourself, which can start to affect your emotional health. So the reality is that, remember I showed you this earlier in the week. I showed you our laws of health. That first law of health, godly trust, does what? It relieves stress. I cannot encourage you enough to try to find, if it is possible, and I know it is, to learn how to know who God is and to learn how to put your trust in him. And the more that you learn how to do that, it's going to help mitigate, it's going to help lower those stress levels. And it's going to build us up and strengthen us up that we can begin to intelligently combat our diabetes. We've reached the conclusion of our diabetes presentation this evening. I want to go ahead and tell you, all of you have these cards, right? If you have this card, the purpose of this card is that one of the services that we at Granite Bay Folsom wanted to offer to all of you is a personal, free, one-on-one lifestyle consultation. If you feel like I'm battling with some things and I don't really know exactly how to get over certain humps so I can get the best improvement on my health, then what I'm going to ask you to do is just please put your name, best way to reach you, and whatever it is that you would like to talk about. And then you do that, you're going to give it to our dear friend, Miss Leah right there, who's walking around in the denim jacket. You give it to her in the back, and you just hand it to her. She will get it to me. I will contact you. And then as I contact you, we'll go ahead and set up some time. And like I said, it's free, it's one-on-one, you have nothing to lose and everything to gain. So this is a service that we're just offering to you if you think it will be beneficial to you. And this way we can go ahead and meet and we can talk about what's going on in your life and hopefully how there can be some degree of help. I'm privileged to have done many, many consultations. They're countless at this point, and I've seen a lot of improvement in people's lives for the better. And that makes me very excited. I love seeing people do well. And so, with that being stated, we have reached the conclusion of our little talk on diabetes. Did we learn some things? Did we get some good information? Good. So let's remember, the blessing is in the doing. Don't just know it, do it. Give it a shot. You pick whatever it is that you can say, I never did that before, or that's not a normal habit of my life. And you go ahead and you give it a shot. And hopefully you'll come back with a great testimony. As you know, Pastor Roddy blessed us with a word of prayer. If you don't mind, I'm just going to ask for God's blessings to be with you as you get ready to head back to your homes. Okay? Let's go ahead and let's have a closing word of prayer. Our Father in heaven, Lord, I want to thank you so much for every precious soul that came here tonight. We talked about diabetes and we learned a good bit. And I'm just praying that whatever it is that we heard that we know could be an improvement in our lives, give us the strength to do it and help us to receive all the blessings and benefits that comes from doing it. Bring us safely to our homes, and may we arrive to our homes in safety, we ask. And we ask it all in Jesus' name. Amen.